Hey folks, here we are with the street rod project again, and today has been kind of an entire day designated mainly to this. I think I've been here 12 and a half hours, and I probably got 9 hours into this today. My major accomplishment was building my A-arms for the back of this. So those A-arms are heavy enough that they could be used on a drop axle on a dump truck, literally. I've built smaller A-arms actually for drop axles than what I made these. But I'm playing with a little different setup on this because of the way I'm doing the airbags and that. I'm setting up the rear axle, even though it's a solid rear axle, on a set of A-arms, and then the bags will sit on top of the axle. But I would also have the option of putting my bags right here at the back of the A-arms. So it gives me a lot of options for evolution on this thing if I decide to change the design. But those arms are 3x2 box tube, quarter wall thickness, triple pass welded. I had to machine the bushings for them and then get the dimensions hyper accurate and accommodate for the weld deflection and blah blah blah. I would not say that making A-arms is in the beginner skill set. It's probably one of those other 300 level tasks, as I said in some of the other videos. But I always like to take on a challenge, and if I'm building a car, I'm going to build everything. So the only reason that I saved the front suspension is because of the novelty of that front suspension, and front engine cradle and stuff came out of a truck that we did use for 8 years and we kind of started this business with. So that has emotional value to us, that something from that truck got used, even though we did end up buying all new parts to do the lowering and airbag suspension and that on it. At least the cradle and frame section up here is from that. But yeah, like I say, I've got, I think I had 2 hours yesterday into these arms, into machining parts, and another 9 hours today. So, and keep in mind, I am a professional welder and machinist. So for something like that to take that amount of time, no, I don't build these A-arms every day, but I do weld and machine every day. So if you were to do this in a garage, you'd have to count probably on 2 full days, if not more, to make those parts. And that's something to consider when you're judging whether you should make the parts or buy something out of a catalog. If these arms were $600 out of a catalog, and you've got a good paying job where you're making $300 to $500 a day at your job, you're better off buying them. They're going to be hyper accurate from somebody that has the jigs and does this stuff every day. Because by the time you log the hours and the materials and everything else, for me, like I say, it's a landmark accomplishment of, oh, I did make everything, including the suspension and the frame and all of that. But, when you look at some of these street rod frames that are out at the shows when they're selling the frame and chassis packages, and they want between $15,000 and $30,000 for a frame, it's highly unlikely, in all honesty, that labor-wise you would be able to build that cheaper than the $15,000 to $30,000. If you've got a bolt-in chassis that you order out of the catalog, it shows up in your driveway and you drop the body from your 57 Chevy on it and you're up and running in a weekend, there's no way you could do that for $15,000 in your own shop. You'd have $25,000 worth of materials and another $25,000 worth of labor. So sometimes it is definitely worth just paying the money, especially if you've got a good paying job that you can just offset your time at your job for the parts, because it'll get you out there playing with the street rod faster, and you can put in the engine, put in the brakes, do all that work still, so it's still yours. But sometimes bought in parts are just cheaper. Same with the lowering kit for this. I would never be able to make the lowering parts for this for the $300 that I paid for the spindles per se. So some things even I will just buy because it's a better value for my time. But something like the frame, because our shop is really slow right now, there's no way I can pay $15,000 for a frame. Besides, there's no frame that's going to do what I need it to do for this particular project. This isn't a 57 Chevy or a 66 GTO where I can buy a pre-built frame for it. But if you're working on something that's more common like that, if you're working on a Mustang or a Camaro or a Firebird and you need a subframe for it because your subframe is damaged, shit, I think you can buy a subframe for a Camaro right out of the catalog for $2,700 with new brakes and everything else in it, brand new, ready to go, bolted in. And if you got a job that will pay for that, you could never fix or repair a junkyard special for that kind of money. So it's just something always to keep in mind. But like I say, I still got to do my upper suspension on my axle, but I finally got the lower suspension in place in here. And this now because in my prior video, I had showed the axle that I had put the lower mounts on. Now those lower mounts will pin right in place on this. And I could even stick 2x4s across under my frame there, across my A-frame, and put some tires on it, and this thing is now rollable. So obviously I've got to clearance my quarter panels, but you know, we're getting there. It's almost portable. Once I get the axle set in there, I could put a ratchet strap on the axle to keep the top from moving, let's say, and I can wheel this in and out of the garage and move it around now. And that's a critical point for you to get a street rod too, because when it is not movable, as this currently isn't, I mean, I've got the little wheelie dollies under it, so I could push it around with 2 other people helping, but getting it to a point where it is portable, even though it doesn't have an engine, it can be moved, changes the dynamic majorly, because if you need to move it in and out in order to have more clearance to work on something or turn it around so that you can get closer to your outlet so your welder can weld the other side of the firewall or whatever it is, just being able to move it makes a big difference and makes a huge landmark in your project. So I always strive to try and keep that inside of the 6-week window, that something is not immobile for longer than 6 weeks, because otherwise it starts to really wear on you, that it's in the way of everything you're trying to do. It goes from being fun to being something you have to do because now it's in the way. So once it's portable, you can always roll it out of the way and throw a tarp over it. But until that time, you can't get to the lawnmower because your project is in the way. People start getting angry. So anyways, another long rambling video because, you know, I'm way too tired and have a whole lot of work I got to do tomorrow to make up for the amount of time I spent on this. But figured I would shoot a video and, you know, happy wrenching, folks. Keep watching for more progress, hopefully. Thank you for watching.